Okay, guys, this is Nostalgia. So today we're going to be taking a look at my level 95 Blizzard Sorceress. This is going to be a build for running Travincal. As you can see, this is in single player, so everything's self-found. This is the I'm using the pluggy mod here. Okay, so I'm going to go over the gear, and then the skills, and then we're going to do some gameplay. Alright, so merc gear, I'm using an infinity. According to the guide I linked in the description, if you use an infinity, you're only going to hit a cold immune once every 45 runs. However, torque is cold immune every time if you don't use infinity. So if you're using an insight, you're going to be hitting a cold immune every time, which is kind of a problem. Now, ideally, you would have an ethereal steelshade, of course. I would say you should have a Vex rune in it. Now, I'm going to explain this. So, if a Hydra deals 100 damage, which each of its little fireballs to your merc, initially, like before any of his resistances or anything like that, say he has 75 fire res, then that's immediately going to get knocked down to 25, and if he has 11 fire absorb, that's going to get knocked down to 14 fire damage. So after the res, if you also have if he also has the integer fire absorb, that's going to get pretty much halved afterwards. Now, I would say ideally you'd have an ethereal version of this with a Vex rune in it for the plus to maximum fire res. So if he has a Vex rune in it with the same setup, except ideally fortitude instead of a smoke here. I have my fortitude on one of my other characters, but if he's initially taking 100 fire damage from each of those little fireballs before any of his resistances, bleh, before any of his resistances. Now, if you have a Vex rune in here, and so he would have 80 fire res, that's going to immediately get knocked down to 20, and then the fire absorb is, if he has 11 anyway, these don't necessarily roll as high as 11, that's going to get knocked down to 9. So you definitely want a higher rolled steelshade. Um, like a mid roll should do fine, especially if especially if he has capped fire res, at least 75. Um, but there's probably with the chest armor. So pretty much the weapon and the helm, these are undisputable. Infinity, ethereal steel shade with a Vex rune in it. For the chest armor, although actually I should say this doesn't really need the Vex rune in it. I don't have if you're playing single player and you don't really want to use a Vex rune on it. It's just if you don't want him, if you just want to make sure he just doesn't die that often, say he's only like level 85 or something like that. If he's level 95 like my merc is, then you don't have to worry as much about it. However, the chest armor is a little bit more disputable than these other two, quite a lot more, I would say. Although I would recommend a fortitude because, well, it has like everything you would ever want on it for Travincal running. It has defense, it has damage, tons of damage. Defense from the plus defense and the chilling armor. It has all resistances. So yeah, you're gonna want a fortitude. Although if you have a really high level merc like I do, you could probably get away with a smoke and do pretty well. Which I've tested around with this and it seems to work fine. I haven't had this merc die in Travincal yet, even with these two gear pieces not being anything like perfect. For the actual Sorc herself, I was using a Trangs on this. However, I still get 83 cold res, even if I'm using a Mage Fist. I upped these because I need strength for the spirit anyway, so I figured I'd just up them to battle gauntlets. Now, I can't quite remember if you were to double up these, if they'd take more strength than the Monarch. It's probably around the same, but that's what I would base that off of if you're planning on double upping these. You want to use Well, ideally you'd have your jewelry, your rings are going to depend on your amulet, basically, because you're trying to hit 105 FCR. I would not try going for 200 FCR in traveling call running. It's just really not worth it. You're just not going to get enough damage. This is not a light sorc. um, so if you have some sort of GG crafted amulet with, say, 2 cold skills or 2 sorc skills, say 20 FCR, 10. Well, actually, I mean, in this case, if you have the rest of the gear I'm using, it would only have to be 11 FCR actually on a crafted amulet. So it couldn't be a rare in this case. If you wanted to use 2 rings that don't have FCR on them, as in 2 Sojas, okay? For instance. However, I'm using this magic amulet here just because, well, it's 3 cold skills and it gives a crap load of life, which, if I'm not mistaken, this gets affected by battle orders. So I have to have FCR on both of my rings because, well, if I were to remove one of these, I'd have literally 1 too little FCR for the 105 breakpoint. Okay, so your rings are really going to depend on your amulet. If you're using 2 FCR rings and, well, you're generally going to want to try to get some resistances on them. Alright. This, as you can see, I'm using a plugin mod so we can take a look at this. This is not a magic find focused build. Now, if you wanted to, you could drop one of the cold skillers for Geeds. Ideally something, well, something even better than this with 40 magic find and whatever the max gold find is, like 160 or whatever. So I'm using 4 cold skillers for well, what you would expect someone to use cold skillers for damage. I'm not using frozen, or I'm not using any of these armor skills. You could, if you're using Snow Clash like I am, hotkey your, I might have it hotkeyed. I never use the stupid thing. Yeah, you see, I don't even have it hotkeyed. You could hotkey your chilling armor and use that every run. I don't think it's worth it, though. Excuse me, so you're going to want to go with for the belt, you're going to want to go with a Snow Clash or an Arachnid Mesh. Now, if you use an Arachnid Mesh, honestly, you probably ideally want an Arachnid Mesh in this slot, although Snow Clash does give +2 to Blizzard, which is a lot of damage, and it gives max cold res and cold absorb. So it's actually pretty dope for Travincal running, I'd say. So if you use an Arachnid Mesh, that means you don't need any FCR on your jewelry, really, at all. So that can open up some gear slots that way. It kind of all what you're going to want to use for these 4 slots kind of all depends if you have a really dope crafted ami with 2 to sorc skills or 2 to cold skills, like 11 plus FCR, resistances, life, strength, that kind of thing. Just something really dope. Alright, so I'm using an orhmus robes. Obviously, you're going to want to have, since I just mentioned I don't use chilling armor, I did not specifically get a chilling armor orhmus robes for this. You're going to want a blizzard orhmus robes. That's the main, other than teleport, that's the main skill you're going to be using for this. Alright, for the weapon, I'm using Depth's Fathom. I haven't tried like a chilling dimensional shard of the Magus with 2 perfect cold facets in it. I doubt that would be as good as Depth's Fathom, even if you found that like ridiculously rare item. Oh yeah, and it would probably have to have +3 to Blizzard on it to even rival Depth's Fathom at all, I would think. Depth's Fathom also gives resistances. It gives ridiculous amounts of cold damage, is why you would use this over anything else, right? So look at my cold damage right now. 11 to 12k, 8.3 to 8.7k. You see that? And the Ice Blast damage, I literally get about 50% more Ice Blast damage from using Depth's Fathom here. I'm using a Nightwings, again for cold skill damage, all skills. Dex, probably gaining a little bit of block chance, although this is not blocking focused. I don't have points in Dex. And I have a facet in this. You're going to want to also have a facet in your Depth's Fathom, okay? Spirit Monarch. If this is a perfect 30, if this is a perfect faster cast rate roll, that might open up your slots here a little bit, depending on what you want to use. For boots, the faster run walk is pretty much irrelevant because you're going to be well, you're on a sorcerer, you're going to be teleporting everywhere. These have tri-res on them, and I'm using some of that anyway. Ideally, I don't know, some sort of crafted caster. I haven't really tested around with the boot slot a lot, but you'd probably want some sort of crafted caster boots with plus mana and mana regen and tri-res or hit recovery. Okay, so obviously bow on switch. There's not really anything else you would bother with. They die so fast on what you would play Travincal on, which is players 3. Anyway, on a Blizzard Sorc, so it makes no sense to use like a life tap wand on switch and try to kill them on P7. It's just not time efficient. Okay, so ideally you're not going to be getting too close to them constantly. I would probably switch out some of these lifers for cold skillers if I had more cold skillers, but right now I'm just running 4. Try to get these with life or hit recovery. Resistances are nice, although actually you can't get resistances on a skill. Never mind. Oh, alright. Okay. So, I have some all-res skillers too, to kind of make up for those gaps also. And then I just filled up the rest with life. So try to get a bunch of cold skillers and then fill up your resistances. And any extra space you have, just use on life. If you're going vanilla single player, you're obviously not going to have a torch in Annie. You would probably just want either an all-res charm or another skiller here. Probably an all-res charm. Ideally one that also has life, like this one here. This one's pretty cool. I found it from Lower Kurast. Alright, so the skills, I'm not going to spend too much time on these, but since your merc's using an infinity stick, well, I'll go over the light skills later. I put 10 extra points in warmth other than the 1 to just unlock it, okay? Because I maxed Blizzard and its synergies first, okay? 1 point in Cold Mastery, again because of the infinity. Then I'd put 10 in warmth because of the infinity stick. I've tested around with this. When I'm going through Travincal here, by the time I'm on, I can't really demonstrate it because I don't have the lower mana regen set up, but by the time I would get back to here, my mana would be like almost drained, and I would take from that well there, and I just did that again. As you can see, I'm not used to playing in window mode for Diablo 2 videos. So that's why I get some extra mana regen, just so I don't have to worry about that as much. I mean, if you don't mind using the well every single time, then just put 1 point in here, I would say. But for me, that's kind of tedious, so I put 10 extra points in here, other than the initial 1 point. I never use telekinesis when I'm running Travincal. If one of the council members spawn cold immune, just don't bother with them anyway. You really just need teleport from this tree here. So what you're going to want to do first is max Blizzard and its synergies, and get a point in warmth, a point in telekinesis and teleport, a point in cold mastery, and later on just start sticking points into frozen orb, which buffs your ice blast damage. Alright, so as you can see, you normally wouldn't have this high of ice blast damage, but you normally wouldn't have points in frozen orb on a Blizzard Sorceress either, I would say. So let's actually test this out. Okay. So depending on your map, this is going to be easier or harder. I have 2 made in groups, so I just drop a Blizzard on each. And these guys are kind of spread out inside, so I just let them all come to me. Right? Whoops. Alright. Oh my god. Okay. So then, well, you would normally go back to Act 4 and log out. It doesn't really matter. Actually, it does a little bit. So then just immediately log out. And we'll do one more. Hopefully I won't click out of the window 10 times this time. So just drop one on whatever each groups you have. And, oh yeah, remember to bow, by the way. Kind of sucks if you don't have bow and you're doing this. And I actually did run out of mana that time. That usually doesn't happen. In fact, that almost never happens, but this time I forgot to bow and I was kind of screwing around here. All right. So that's a couple Travincal runs. It's not too bad on players 3, as you can see. And I'll just show these off. That's actually okay. I don't know what build I would use that for, though. Alright. Have a good one, guys.